How you doing, Lacey?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. I'm excited. This is our first double header. So today, this afternoon, what we're doing is the signature red flight. And so you all gave us a lot of feedback after our first virtual tasting last weekend and said that red wines would be nice. We apologized with that first flight for the red wine drinkers. There was only one red, and that is a very good red, so it's making its way back in to the flight here. Oh, great. And Becky's back. We got some people. Marta's on here. How you doing, Marta?
We've got all sorts of people joining us.
Yeah.
I think this was, the red flight has definitely been a very popular option. So we're excited to drink these along with you this afternoon, and it should be fun.
Yeah, good. We got some of our heavy hitters in here today. Hopefully we'll have some good questions. Matt, Lindsay, so glad you all are here. Eric's back. Eric, thank you very much for all your support this week. We appreciate it. So for those who are getting their wines prepped up and ready, again, this is a new project, so we realize, it'd be great to have a little card in there giving you the spec sheet, giving you the order in which we'll taste the wines. We're going to go Pinot Noir first, we're going to taste the Pursuit second, and then we're going to do Windswept and Hogback last. Cassie and David, welcome back. Welcome back. Tasha's here. Good to see you as well. Miss Colbert, always a pleasure to have you here. So what we'll do is, I think, should we get some wine in the glass? I think we should dive straight into this, especially with the people in the room. You kind of know what the project is out here, but if you haven't done the estate tasting yet or gotten the full rundown of the property, with the 300 acres that we have out here and being located on such a unique geological structure in Hogback Mountain, we really have found that red wines are going to be constitute from a majority standpoint about 2/3 of what we ultimately have the estate planted to, and there's varying parts of the property, different blocks, different soils, things like that, but by and large we think red wines are going to be a really exciting project for us to enjoy. And I think that when we sort of talk about Virginia more broadly, red wines in the best vineyard sites represent some of the best wines in the state. So
absolutely.
And obviously engagement is required. It's fun. We noticed that about 1/3 of the way through the tasting, suddenly a bunch more questions are asked to us, and it maybe is the lubricant of the wine sort of hitting in.
As we're getting through, but it's getting a little bit later in the afternoon on Sunday, so maybe you've had a glass or two already. Who knows? Maybe you joined us earlier today. We did a estate tasting at 1:00, so we're ready for this one. Should be fun. So we're going to start off with a little bit of Pinot Noir.
Yeah. So the 2017 Wild Boar Pinot Noir. So these first two wines, they are part of our Wild Boar Cellars label, meaning we are sourcing fruit from other grape growers, making the wine ourselves, aging it, bottling it here as well. And as you all know, generally the Wild Boar Cellars label is always produced or inspired by something that we're doing from the property out here. And what it was, 2014 was the first year in which we produced this Wild Boar Pinot Noir. And the real reason why we did it's not just because we are huge Pinot Noir fans, but it's really because we found a really unique spot of the property where we actually decided to do a little experiment, an educated roll of the dice, where we put in, now we have about 2.5-3 acres of this varietal in the ground. It's a very steep, cool, east-facing vineyard slope, which is very important because by and large, Virginia is probably not best suited for Pinot Noir. It's a grape varietal that is French. One of the most ancient grape varietals as well. If you take grapes like Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Meunier, genetically they are all the exact same as Pinot Noir. It's an ancient varietal that's been around for 2,000 years. So when you want to drink a wine or a varietal that was literally made thousands of years ago, Pinot is a great way to go. And because of its sort of rich history, there's lots of different mutations of it, but it's a very finicky grape. Pinot Noir, when we look at this wine, compared to if you're a Cabernet Sauvignon lover or a Petit Verdot lover, you'll definitely notice this wine maybe doesn't necessarily have the same level of depth in terms of the color, and we can kind of dive into that maybe as we go along here, but it's not to sort of say this wine lacks flavor. In fact, for me, it's almost deceiving. Now, again, this doesn't have the weight and body of those Cabernets, the Merlots, things like that, but from an aromatic standpoint, Pinot Noir is just one of the most seductive wines, I think, one of the best food-friendly wines as well. But one of the big reasons why it's such a fickle or notoriously difficult grape is because it is thin-skinned, and it has these very, very tight clusters, which means that it's very susceptible to damage from storms, but more specifically and more problematically for here in Virginia, those thin skins and tight clusters make fungal pressures and disease pressures very high and pronounced, because when we have these compacted bunches where literally berries are sort of smashed on top of one another, it makes it very hard for moisture, sunshine, air to kind of get in there and get that moisture dried up, which then means mold, fungus, mildew, and rot can really emerge. So that's one of the big reasons why you don't find it widely throughout Virginia. The other big thing is that generally it's a cool climate grape varietal. If you take a cool climate grape varietal, it generally means that it begins its growing, earlier in the year, and it ripens earlier. And the whole goal of sort of getting the best varietal in the best location, you kind of want to maximize the number of days that grape varietal's on the vine. And with Pinot, if you take it, a cool climate grape, and put it in a warm or hot area, it'll ripen too quickly, and you generally kind of have, they kind of say you take Pinot Noir, put it in a really warm place, the varietal can kind of produce a wine that kind of smells like flat cherry soda a little bit. That's just kind of muddled. It kind of lacks the nuance and elegance of what a good Pinot should be. And so despite all of that stuff, we decided to plant some Pinot Noir because we have a very cool east-facing steep slope. It's the coolest part of our property. In the last tasting, Lacey brilliantly talked about the fact that we have a variety of different weather stations throughout this property, and on any given day, you take the warmest part of the property and the coolest, and it can be anywhere from a 10 and sometimes even a 15-degree difference. You times that then by the number of days over the 5-month growing season, it does add up to a pretty substantial difference, and this is kind of the coolest spot there. And we figured, the first few vintages that we did from the property, we put towards rosé, and this past year was the first year that we actually, it was about a ton of grapes that we put towards actually producing a Pinot like this. So
yeah, which was a fun project. We used so we have an optical sorter here in the winery, and so we put it on its most stringent settings. So anything that was running through, we just made it was the darkest fruit, the ripest, most good looking stuff coming through for that Pinot Noir. And really for us, we're excited we're in the planning stages of doing an estate sparkling wine program, and that's really where this Pinot Noir is going to come in, because we can pick it earlier and just really have that bright, fresh acidity and everything, and it'll work better growing wise. But here in Virginia too, I would just point out that Pinot Noir can do really beautifully in the Shenandoah. So then you're getting a little bit more elevation, a little bit cooler climate. So that's, where that would really be the one spot in the state other than this very chilly little nook. It's, most of you have been out here, I'm sure. And so it's the steepest hillside, really at kind of the bottom of the hills coming in through on the property.
And real quick, there's some really good questions. Here. But real quick, just to say, so this fruit is, we worked with a grape grower in Willamette Valley, Oregon. Every different year we've kind of gone somewhere else, but I think just a gorgeous expression of Pinot Noir from Oregon, and I think that's been one of the greatest parts about the Wild Boar Cellars labels. Obviously, we always look internally in the state here first, but if we're not happy with the quality or the fruit or wine that we want to make just doesn't exist, we'll really go out to these wine growing regions that really sort of inspire us. And I think Oregon has one of the most miraculous stories of any fine wine growing region on the planet right now. Literally, if you went back to the 60s, people were not planting any grapes or making wine in Oregon. You flash forward now 50, 60 years, or 55 years, from that point in time, there's nobody in the wine industry who would say that Oregon, and specifically the Willamette Valley, should not be considered a world-class wine growing region. And that's definitely something that I think was was built upon sort of the camaraderie and the team mentality they have there, and really focusing a lot on vineyard and site selection and stuff. So I think it's just a nice wine. I hope you all enjoy it. And last thing too is that there is, when you mentioned the Shenandoah Valley, if you go, one of the top producers in the state of Virginia is all the way at the far southwest portion, actually going up into the Allegheny Mountains, or the Appalachian Mountains, but specifically the Allegheny Ridge. And their vineyards are about 1,000 feet above sea level. It's Anketa Ridge. They really just focus on Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. You have to check them out. They do just absolutely. They produce the best Pinot Noir in the state of Virginia, and it's a very good one. So there was a good question earlier by Rich Patriot regarding, is Virginia too harsh? It generally is too warm, and it's generally too wet and humid, so it requires a very, very exceptional site to produce it. And by and large, there's not too many people who have done it yet, but Anketa Ridge is definitely one. And, we'll see how our turns out.
And just like the nicest people ever too. So
very nice family.
That's very important to me in the wine as well. But we've had so many good questions come through, so keep them coming. Quarantine snacks to pair with Pinot. What do you think?
Quarantine snacks. Cured meat, salami, charcuterie is just a dream.
That's where I was going too.
Super easy too.
And I've been quarantining here on the property at Stone Tower, so I have access to the marketplace and I had some of our Prairie Breeze what is that, kind of like a cheddar?
It is,
almost?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That I actually had with some Pinot the other night.
That'd
and then,
really good.
The fridge is stocked too with salami. So, quick plug, if you need anything like that, we have plenty, so just give us a call. And we can have that for you. Another question that came through is, does Stone Tower have any other vineyard sites here in Virginia? And the short answer is no, we do not. So all of our that we manage 100% is right here on the property for vineyard wise. But we do work with quite a few different growers here in the state of Virginia. For most of our Wild Boar program, most of those wines are coming from different vineyards throughout the state, and so we work closely with different vineyard growers on those.
And Cassie and David had a really good question, because you were talking earlier about the optical sorter, asking how much fruit is discarded by the optical sorter when it comes through. And I think that's a really good question. Next time you're in the tasting room, we can sort of, I can hand my phone from a safe distance and show it to you. I have a really great video of that process taking place. You can Google it as well, or YouTube it as well. There's some really good ones. The short answer is that it's not an excessive amount, as it's sort of going through there, and there's a variety of reasons for that, but it really kind of depends on how, if you look at there's like a touch screen that's on there that has a variety of different parameters, and each one of them are kind of on a 1 to 10 point scale, with 10 being the most strict and most perfect. So based on your sort of desired level of sort of selection, you could make it very high rejection rate, but I think for us generally it's not much, because for a variety of reasons. We're sorting out in the vineyard all year long, and there's a very critical sorting process that takes place just prior to harvest, where anything that doesn't look perfect, they're going to cut it away. It occurs again when we actually do harvest. Anything that doesn't look perfect on that pass, they're not going to bring in. We're sorting a third time with the actual sorting table itself, where we'll have 4 to 5 people on each side of the actual sorting table, picking out individual sort of clusters that don't look good, individual berries as well if it's going through the destemmer, and then finally that fourth sort is really the optical sorter. So if it's sorting heavily by the time we get to that point in time, we've really kind of messed things up to that stage. It's really kind of the idea when we're trying to produce, as we work into these last 2 wines, these wines are priced at $65 and $69 a bottle. What gets you to that sort of world-class level, there's a lot more work that goes into making your wines just a little bit better. And that optical sorter, that little bit of removing is kind of, it's not much out here, but it's definitely a very important amount for getting that sort of top.
For sure, and it all depends on really what your settings are as well. But I always like to say, if you wouldn't want to eat it, you probably don't want to drink it. So that's kind of our sorting method. We really try to be as strict as possible in that process to make sure that really just the best fruit is coming through, because that's what it's gonna end up in the glass. Eventually, you'll be able to catch anything that's a little wonky. But yeah, and then another good question that came through: Pinot Noir, should it be decanted or aerated? I guess that's a
It's a loaded question,
Yeah.
depending on who you ask. If you go to Burgundy, the domains there, they don't have decanters. They won't decant wines. And the reason is that generally speaking, people say the more delicate or fragile the wine, you don't want to decant it. And the reason why is because when you put a wine in a decanter, it does rapidly expose the wine to oxygen. And if the wine does have a more delicate sort of aromatic flavor profile, they argue that you will lose some of the nuance and subtleties and sort of delicacy of the wine, that you should treat it gently and things like that. And also they say there's no need to decant Pinot Noir, because if we took this wine and aged it, one of the other reasons for why probably the most important reason for why you decant a wine is typically to remove the wine from sediment that may develop from maybe natural winemaking, or really most importantly with red wine, as a wine ages in bottle, it will throw sediments. And Pinot Noir, being a thinner skinned varietal, being a lighter colored wine, generally isn't known to do that. That's actually one of the reasons why you'll notice these three bottles kind of have they're the Bordeaux shape. They have a steeper shoulder. That's actually designed because Bordeaux style wine is generally meant to age longer. When you pour or decant the wine, that actually helps. Generally, if you're doing it properly, it's going to stay right here, and so the sediment gets caught there, and then the decanter helps you do that as well. But they have a nice smooth shoulder bottle here for Pinot, because there's no real need to kind of decant that wine at all. Mm-hmm. So, but that being said, I generally will. If it's a New World bottling, I think it all kind of depends. I have a firm belief that you're not going to. If it's an older Pinot Noir, I don't decant it. But if it's a younger one from like Oregon, California, our Wild Boar one, I'll generally put it in a decanter gently, and I'll just drink it. Or I'll just put it in the glass. I don't know. It's, like I said, it's kind of a loaded question, but generally, classically, if you're in Burgundy, don't ask for your wine to be decanted.
Okay.
If it's Pinot.
I hope I get to go to Burgundy and ask that question. Well, I won't.
Yeah.
Now I know I won't.
Yeah.
But
yeah, just to ask them, just to see if I might.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's a really good question. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I guess, and that goes along with, so how do you know which wines are delicate? And I think that would go in understanding the different varietals, would definitely be part of it, and then also with age as well. The older a wine is, probably the more delicate.
Yeah, and generally kind of like a good proxy would be thinking about the weight of the wine, and by weight of the wine we're kind of referring to like how big is it, what is the alcohol percentage, what is the viscosity of the wine, does it feel more like whole milk when you drink it, or does it feel more like skim milk, and that's kind of the textural difference between a full-bodied wine and a light-bodied wine. But then a wine that's older, really a wine that's more prone to oxidation as well, so yeah, it's a really good question. So maybe
let's go to this next one, and then we can go through. Yeah.
This is a fun wine. So several of you all have been coming out here for years, and you've developed a fondness for a red blend that really the first red wine we ever produced was under the Wild Boar Cellars label. It was called Sanglier Noble, and it was always meant to sort of be a Bordeaux style blend under that label. Well, as kind of the industry here in Virginia grew and the scarcity of fruit emerged, there were a couple of times where we had to go outside of the state with the Wild Boar label to produce that really nice Bordeaux blend. And finally, after working really hard to negotiate contracts the way we wanted them, we got a pretty reliable, high quality source of Virginia fruit pretty much year in and year out now. And rather than sort of creating confusion, with the various labels, we developed the pursuit. The first vintage we did, it was the 2015 vintage, so now this is the second iteration of this bottling to really represent a Bordeaux style blend under the Wild Boar label that is kind of the best foot forward that we could do from all Virginia fruit. Okay, but nothing coming from the estate generally. Okay, so we're working with two different grape growers really. The fruit here is coming from both the Middleburg area, Middleburg, Virginia, as well as the Monticello AVA, so in and around the Charlottesville, Virginia area. And it's a really gorgeous wine. It's largely driven by Cabernet Sauvignon at about 40%. There's a good chunk of Merlot in this. There's almost 20% of a grape called Tannat, which has a fun story. Hopefully somebody asks. I'm not even going to tell you anything more about Tanat because I hope someone will ask a question about it. Otherwise, my study might be useless. Yeah, if not, I'll ask it. But I thought that basically the name for Pursuit, it's got an important inspiration, right?
Yeah, for sure. So if you have the actual bottle of this at home, you might notice there's a little bit of light writing behind this label here. And, as we were going through and figuring out the name, we wanted to really pay homage to the fact that this is, a proper Virginia wine. And, it goes back to our forefather, Thomas Jefferson. And so I was looking through old letters and things that he had written, and just some of his writings on agriculture and his writings on wine and whatnot. And I found this quote that I really liked from him, which is on the back of the label here. It says, "Agriculture is our wisest pursuit, because it will in the end contribute the most to real wealth, good morals, and happiness." And so that's Thomas Jefferson wrote this in a letter to George Washington in August of 1787. So that, as we were going through and figuring out names, it really feels right that, because this is our pursuit, 400 some years later, is this idea of creating wine and creating a connection to the land, and hopefully we end up with some real wealth, good morals, and happiness from this endeavor that we're on. It was kind of the thought process behind here.
Yeah, and again, I think that arguably a very important person, no doubt, for our country, but even before our country was actually formed, grape growing and winemaking began in what would become Virginia. California gets, for a lot of really good reasons, is considered sort of the epicenter, sort of in the start of American wine. But really it was over 400 years ago that in Jamestown, when the English settlers arrived, they were actually required in 1619 to plant and maintain 10 vines, because originally they thought that for the crown that would be the primary sort of import back to the crown, which would be great. Obviously, there was a variety of reasons for what
didn't quite work out.
Did not go well. But one of the most important steps forward was with Thomas Jefferson at his Monticello estate, and worked exhaustively with a world-renowned viticulturalist from Italy, and really tried hard. And I think that sort of industriousness, and just sort of, he tried over 230 different varietals at his estate, and that sort of Virginia is like a truly American wine growing region in the sense that it's sheer willpower and determination to kind of achieve this vision. And I think Stone Tower is a great anecdote that kind of builds off that. But I think that, we were talking about Anketa Ridge. I think you could take almost any producer in this state and sort of look at the people behind that project, and that sort of determination, that pursuit to do something that people believe can't be done, and and history tells you it can't be done. But now here we are because of that determination. There's some really high quality wines now in the state, which is awesome.
Absolutely.
So some good questions here.
Your wish came true. You have a lot of questions about
yes.
Tanat now.
So we'll go there first. So Tanat is a French grape varietal native to southwest France. So remember, southwest France is also home to the Bordeaux region, where grapes like Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc are famously produced. There is an appellation, because remember, in Western Europe, the secondary concern, or a second discussion point, is talking about the varietal. There's an appellation, or a place called Maturin, and it's located outside of Bordeaux, a little bit further south, kind of working into the Pyrenees Mountains that divide sort of Spain and France from one another. And this Tanat grape varietal must comprise 60% or more of the wines from that appellation. And Tanat itself is a small black skin grape varietal, very thick skins, and so it can give you a very powerful wine. Now, again, in France, it's different than maybe if we grow it in the New World, but you kind of want to think about it along the lines of kind of Petit Verdot meets Malbec. Okay, but it can morph around a little bit, okay, where Tanat can sort of give you the structure, the power and the brawn of a Petit Verdot, but it can also give you this really beautiful sort of like deep violet purple kind of color, and just this really kind of hedonistic color and kind of cool fruit profile as well. So now you're kind of classic Tannat, and hopefully Virginia will make its mark here. But with Tannat, its most famous area probably now is actually in Uruguay. So Uruguay is not necessarily for most of us kind of at the forefront of our consciousness of fine wine growing regions, but they are making some serious strides. A couple years back, they actually had a wine make it into the top 100 wines of the year for Wine Spectator. I think it was 2017.
Yeah.
But they deal with a lot of humidity and a lot of rainfall, and this grape varietal, like Petit Verdot in this state, has a thick skin. Okay, gives us a lot of color and tannin in there as well, and so it's actually very resistant to a lot of disease pressures. Whatever's growing well in Southwest France as well as in Uruguay generally is going to be a good trial grape for Virginia because of the amount of rainfall and humidity we get. So a couple of people, Janelle, I saw you mention Chateau O'Brien makes a great Tannat. They absolutely do. There's a ton of other great ones in the state. I think it's a grape that offers a lot of promise the way that Petit Verdot does as well. Okay, so I think it's a grape to watch out for, and I think specifically in this wine, it really kind of helps add a little structure and backbone and color to the wine in a really nice way. So,
absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, we got that. Oh, cool. There was a Tannat in Paso Robles. Interesting. How was that?
I bet you it was probably good if they're mentioning it. But who knows? It's a good question. And yeah.
Oh, and Rich Patriot. So one of the reasons why the Pursuit emerged in 2015, because you are correct. So the very first Sanglier Noble, the first 3 Sanglier Noble bottlings that we did were all Virginia based, and then in 2013 moving forward, that's when we bottled sort of an American version. But in 2014, once we sort of reestablished some relationships with various grape growers in the state, we actually produced 2 in the same year. 2014, we produced 2 bottles of Sanglier, which was very confusing. One of them had Virginia on the label. So one, the fruit was from Napa Valley, and the other one was from sort of around the Delaplane area. And it was very kind of confusing. So we said, we need a new.
So then we decided to
label.
go for the Pursuit here as a little bit of a change up. So all similar, and like the rest of these wines we'll be tasting, we love single varietals, but we also really love red blends, and that has always been the focus of the Sanglier Noble. Then the Pursuit are really the 2 under the Wild Boar label, and then we have our flagship wines here, the Windswept Hill and Hogback Mountain.
I can never figure out where I put them. All right,
There
we go. We're here. A 2017 Pursuit.
Yes, we do have one.
We will be doing one.
Yeah, so that is hanging out. We're cellaring it for you. So we'll be releasing that at some point, but not quite yet.
And there was a question about, how do Tannats from South America vary from ones in the U.S.? I unfortunately don't have a lot of experience tasting. Like, I have never tasted Tannat. I've tasted Tannat from Maturin, the appellation in France. A couple of those. I've had Tannat from Uruguay. A couple of those. Outside of Virginia, I actually haven't really had a lot of Tannat. I would say Uruguayan Tannat does remind me a little bit more of Virginia, but there's also some Tannat in Virginia that tastes like Maturin. I think it's one of those things where experimentation will tell. But I think probably the best thing to do that. There's a lot of resources out there on sort of Tannat, but specifically Wine Folly has a great they do a great job. Madeline Puckett does a great job with sort of her visualizations, and really kind of, I love it because it's a very concise way of breaking down descriptions of wines and stuff like that. Yeah. And she does a really good heuristic sort of dividing Tannat into these 2 categories. And I think that as you kind of come along, I'd love to kind of, if you end up kind of getting out and tasting those Tannats from the rest of the country, kind of let me know what you think, because it'd be interesting to see how stylistically. My guess would be is maybe in Virginia it's going to lean a little closer to French, but I don't really know. I don't know. I think it's time will tell. But fun, great.
All right. So the last question that just came through is, I would say, kind of a mean one. what is your favorite Stone Tower wine and why? So I'm just going to answer for this flight is actually this one we're going to try right now, the Windswept Hub.
Yeah.
And then overall, I have about, I mean, I think at this point we've realized we've made close to 100 different wines. Yeah. And I probably have 70 favorites. So it's generally like the wine we most recently release becomes my favorite for about a month, and I'm so excited about it. And then, you know, they're all good. So
Yeah. You know, and we would be remiss if we didn't say Mike Huber, your father, famously says that what his favorite wine is always contingent upon what he's eating.
That's true, and that's a very real. Yeah, that's a very real thing, because especially, you know, these wines here, I would classify all of them as being fantastically food friendly wines. So, I mean, delicious to drink on their own, sure, but then when you really get into, these wines are built to be enjoyed at the table with, you know, some delicious snacks or meal behind them as well.
And if you do have 2 glasses for each taster, pouring both the Windswept and the Hogback at the same time side by side is something that we love to do out here when we can, because, you know, again, from the estate out here. So again, these first 2 wines they're great wines. They're great sort of benchmarks for us to kind of be inspired by and hopefully exceed in terms of quality from the property. But these last 2 wines are 100% from the property, and, you know, depending on how you define favorite or flagship, I mean, these are 2 of the wines that really, I think, the most work goes into and probably have the most ability to be drinking in 10, 12, 15 years from now if properly stored. But what's really cool is that, you know, with these 2 wines, both of them, there's a lot of variables controlled for between these 2 wines, okay? So yes, they're 100% from the property. They're largely coming from about 16 acres of Bordeaux red grape varietals that were planted back in 2010. Both of these wines were harvested within, you know, a week or so of one another. They were fermented and they were aged in largely French oak barrels for about 20 months. The amount of maceration or skin contact was very similar. So there's a lot that's similar, but what's really different is going to be the blends of these 2 varietals. And when in 2013 we really got our first full estate red harvest out here, where we were going to make red wines under the estate label. And when we're sort of starting out, these blends don't just start immediately. You know, each one of these Bordeaux red grape varietals, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, one of the most important reasons for why we do the blends and why Chateau and Bordeaux had many varietals planted is because they perform slightly differently out there in the vineyard. So for instance, Cabernet Franc and Merlot will begin their growing season earlier than, say, grapes like Cabernet Sauvignon. Therefore, they ripen earlier. They also can maybe avoid late-in season events like hurricanes here in Virginia, but big weather storm patterns can impact Bordeaux as well. Well, unfortunately, when they bud earlier, you know, around this time, Cabernet Franc and Merlot probably aren't too far off here, especially after this coming week's weather. But once that buds out, they're very susceptible to frost damage. Well, if Cabernet Sauvignon and Petit Verdot haven't begun yet, well, they will be sort of saved from that. And so there's a variety of really important times throughout the year where that diversification is very important, and they do ripen at different points in time. So when we go out there, generally the Cabernet Franc and Merlot is harvested first, then the Cabernet Sauvignon and Petit Verdot last. Well, the fermentation and initial aging process begins individually. And then once we get a couple months in, generally around the winter time, generally around January, February, around the time we start doing the barrel tastings with you all, we really kind of start doing trial blends at that point in time. And when that process began in 2013, where do you start? No one had ever done any blending from the property. Well, the inspiration initially was, well, let's look at Bordeaux and what are kind of the fundamental styles in Bordeaux. And again, Bordeaux's a big region. They produce just a lot of wine. But when we talk about the top of that quality pyramid in Bordeaux, when it comes to red wine, there's kind of a dichotomy that exists based on the region there, the soils and the mesoclimates that exist there. And specifically, they've been divided into what they call left bank blends and right bank blends. And there's this massive tributary that sort of divides these 2 halves of the region called the Gironde. And on the left bank, based on the soils there being rockier, a little bit more gravel based, the best wines are generally dominated by Cabernet Sauvignon. And then on the right bank, in and around communes like Pomerol and Saint-Emilion, you'll find wines that are largely driven by Merlot and Cabernet Franc. So this was a natural starting place for us, and that really kind of set the stage for the Windswept Hill and the Hogback Mountain. So tasting these two wines side by side is a really great fun thing, and we've kind of been able to, the blends have varied every year for both the Windswept and the Hogback Mountain, but broadly speaking, the 2017 wines that you have in front of you, 2017 is probably one of the best vintages that we put into bottle from the estate. Time will tell whether or not, where it stacks up next to the other ones, but I think definitely give us sort of a classic representation of our classic Windswept, our classic Hogback, and do a great job kind of illustrating the differences between a right bank, a Cabernet Franc Merlot based wine, which gives us great elegance, smoothness, roundness, compared to a Cabernet Sauvignon based blend. And that's really kind of largely been true throughout the history of these two wines.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So like Jeremy said, if you do have two different glasses and can taste them side by side, that's always a fun way to take a look at these, because they really are, for me, it's fun to see, because you really have, the wines are the vineyards are just set right next to each other, and you're using some of the same wines, the same initial, because we ferment in these bivarietal, and so it's really, this is the difference, but the quality the quality overall really comes from they're treated the same in terms of the vineyard and the winemaking and everything. We're paying very close attention to both of these wines as we go through, and then their differences really do come from this blending process. So it really is showing the talent of our winemaking team here, and in how these wines come together. And this past winter we had really fun and interesting new thing that we've done for the 2018 red wines, and then also the initial blending for our 2019 red wines as well, where we went and it was with this a barrel maker and then winemaking consultant named Francis Miquel. He is French. Miquel. And we went through and tasted literally every single barrel in the Shea, which is...
It was like hundreds, right? It was like 400, 500?
Like 900.
900?
Yeah. Like crazy. This was over a course of a week. In one day, they tasted 275 barrels, which, you're getting a little loopy by the end of that day. But it made such a difference, because you can just see the exact same wine can be in two barrels of the same, the same cooper, the same barrel technically, and have like really these amazing nuances and differences. It doesn't even feel nuanced in the moment. It feels like wildly different, how they taste and their aromas and everything. So it was a fascinating process, and something that we'll continue to do. Really was a big learning curve for this year, but something that we're going to integrate into our winemaking program going forward. But because you can really pick out, when you're doing these barrel blends and bringing things back together, you can really pick out what specifically, this barrel of Cab Franc goes great with this of Merlot, or this Cab Franc goes great with this of Cabernet Sauvignon for, your different blends and everything. So it's a fascinating process for sure.
It's if there's a way of making tasting a bunch of wine all day long for multiple days exhausting, winemakers and consultants will do it for you.
That's for sure.
Yeah, we had some really good questions as well. Cassie, you kind of had a good sort of, we would call that a Jeremy question out here. It's a multifaceted question that allows for me to ramble for a couple minutes. I'll keep it actually brief though. But your question was, how does the Virginia growing season impact these Bordeaux varietals? And I think that broadly speaking, they seem to perform, again, the winemaking team is probably, our viticultural consultants are probably, a little bit better to ask about. But pretty similarly to Bordeaux, I mean, we generally kind of, maybe it's easier to talk about the challenges of what we have out here. Generally, it's challenging to, given the condensed growing season, to develop the desired sugar levels year in and year out with these Bordeaux varietals, with the humidity and moisture, because we are more wet and more humid than Bordeaux. Our disease risk is greater than in Bordeaux, which means that finding the right vineyard site and doing a lot of meticulous vineyard management to reduce the pressures is very important. The other challenge we have is we have very warm nights, which is both a good and a bad thing. Warm nights, we think about plants growing, they need sunshine, which drives photosynthesis, which helps them with kind of the sugar production, at least with fruit. But temperature and hours of temperature are very important for the sort of physiological ripeness. So physiological ripeness would be defined as sort of the fruit taste ripe, and it's sometimes correlated with sugar development, but not always. And so temperature, warm nights allow for the vine to continue to sort of ripen the fruit. But what can happen during that process, which is called respiration, the acidity can go down. And so the idea is sometimes you have a challenge maintaining the brightness and freshness and the acidity that we really like, which is really good. And you also asked, how does winemaking vary according to weather? Generally speaking, the warmer, the sunnier, the drier the wine growing season, we're generally able to produce a wine that is more that is bigger, right? The sugar levels were higher, so the alcohol is a little riper. The wine has a richer texture. We're able to extract more out of the skins in terms of color, flavor, and tannin. And so the wines, those are generally the wines that, and this kind of transitions into Eric's question, sort of how long can maybe the hogback last. When this sort of happens out here, when we're able to sort of extract all that those grape skins really have to offer, we can produce wines that presumably will age 10, 15, 20 years if the wines are stored well. And Eric, the 2017 Windswept and Hogback are both very well structured from an aging standpoint, with the Hogback probably going, I think, safely 10 years. And then, probably proceed with caution once you get north of 15 years. But again, the oldest vintage we've done is 2013, and it's drinking beautifully right now. I think 10 years is definitely a safe bet. Time will tell whether or not we can hit that 15 and 20 year mark. So I'd hate to have anything go longer than that.
Yeah.
So that happens in a warm, sunny, dry year. And then in a cooler year, or maybe a wetter year, where maybe the fruit doesn't reach the same level of maturity, we have to dial back the extraction. Otherwise, the wine can be like, they're just very astringent and just, out of balance. So, and maceration or extraction, that's that contact of juice with skin, which is the process really how we make red wine.
Yeah, absolutely. So, say for the 2018 vintage, that was definitely a very, very wet year, much cooler and all of those things. But I actually am really excited about the red wines that we were able to produce from that year, because I personally really like the Pinot, and this for me is one of my favorite of the flight, because I love a lighter red, and that is definitely, we didn't make a Windswept or Hogback in 2018. We're focusing more on single varietals, Cabernet Franc, we have a Petit Verdot, Merlot, and it's a totally different flavor profile and just totally different wines than we've ever really produced from the property. But that is just so indicative of the vintage, and that's really what I think is so exciting about Virginia wines in general, is just every year tells a different story based on the weather that we have. You're not going to get, it would be very difficult to be like a huge mass brand grocery store wine coming from Virginia, because every year is going to be so different for us. And so, but that's the exciting part, I think, as well. So, yeah.
Pedro, was I'm glad you brought up that question. We should just briefly, just to clarify what the blends are here. There is no Tannat in the Windswept Hill. The Pursuit had about 20% Tannat in there, but largely was a Cabernet Sauvignon Merlot driven blend. The Windswept Hill specifically would be around 60% Merlot, about 30% Cabernet Franc, and then the rest is a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon, a little bit of Petit Verdot. The 2017 Hogback is about right around 75% Cabernet Sauvignon, about 20% Merlot, a little Petit Verdot, Cabernet Franc to round that out. That's a good question, good point of clarification, because those varietals, and that, again, long-winded way of kind of getting those differences in varietals are really going to be some of the most important things kind of distinguishing the different flavor profile between the Windswept and Hogback as you taste that, where with the Windswept, with the Merlot and the Cabernet Franc, you get a wine that typically is going to have a more silky, more elegant sort of finesse texture and flavor profile, where with the structure of Cabernet Sauvignon, you generally have a little bit more brawn and power and richness with the Hogback, relatively speaking, you know, and that's generally also similar to sort of the varietal differences between there. Sam, I thought you asked a brilliant question about how to know when a wine goes bad. The short answer is, if you stick your nose in the glass and it smells bad, and you taste it and it tastes bad too, that's the short answer. You know, because really you should, I mean, the nose should go, but obviously your question is more so about when maybe a wine has been overaged or maybe the wine has a fault in it. Generally, if the question is kind of about, you know, a wine has gone bad, meaning it was good, it was a sound wine, but maybe the wine was overaged, there's going to be a variety of things that you can do. Again, first by looking at it, if the wine is kind of developing not orange but like brownish tinges to at the end. So again, what I'm talking about is you take the glass, hold it away from you at a 45-degree angle over something that's relatively light. If you see hints of brown coming in, that's going to be your first initial red flag. Then when you smell the wine, if it smells kind of like vinegar, and obviously, you know, you don't want your wine to smell like vinegar or anything like that, but if you know what like kind of balsamic vinegar smells like, or red wine vinegar, if you get a hint of that, it's kind of going down that path. You can actually get that in young wine that has suffered from a couple faults as well. That will be a cue for you if the wine kind of smells just kind of oxidized, if it kind of smells like tawny port and just like caramel and things like that. There's just, you know, but again, generally the wine will kind of have lost its fruit profile. The wine will be very tart. Maybe you're tasting the alcohol very aggressive in there. Those will all be things, but let your nose and your taste kind of ultimately guide it as well.
That's the main thing.
Yep.
We've got some fun questions about Norton. Hey, Phil. So in that, so we have made a few vintages of regular table wine Norton under our Wild Boar Cellars program. So that's all fruit coming from Loudoun County. And we also use the Norton grape in our port style wine, the Porton. And we actually do have some plans to put in a relatively small planting, about 3 to 4 acres of Norton coming up here in a couple years. So not this spring, but next spring we're planning on doing that. And that will probably be enough for our port style wine production, the Porton. And then maybe some table wine too. We'll see. So a regular dry wine. I like Norton too on certain, you know, it depends on the wine specifically. I think why I've liked our Wild Boar Cellars Nortons has been, we do blend a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon in those usually, which kind of balances out that foxy characteristic that you can sometimes get. What's cool about Norton is that you can really grow it wherever. So we talk so much about site selection and, you know, where on what aspects and what soils and all of these things, you know, are the best for each different varietal. But with Norton, you can kind of stick it wherever you want and it's going to grow. So we've got some sites here that we wouldn't plant anything else on. So we might as well stick some Norton in there.
Yeah. Some other good stuff. Still in hiding. Thanks for joining us again for the second half of today's doubleheader. I want to very much do a Petit Verdot tasting kit. We actually have a couple great ones on sort of our library menu, specifically the 2015 Wild Boar Petit Verdot that I think would be fun. So I think we'll find a way over here the coming weeks to do that. Sean, I thought you asked a really nice question about Malbec, because we did actually have Malbec planted. If you're familiar with the property out here, you go to our website. When we look south, there's this pond that has the grotto there. Well, where the grotto is, it's kind of a hill to the right of that. We had about just shy of an acre of Malbec planted there. We got our first harvest. It was actually the 2017 vintage. When we got our first harvest, we had 1 barrel worth of Malbec that it produced, and it actually tasted really awesome. And we ripped the vines out. Some of you all in here, Mike or Becky Com, I saw you mention that you were in the tasting earlier. If you're still here, I think you all were actually at that barrel tasting where we kind of did the varietal component tasting. We tasted that Malbec and it was amazing. We said, yeah, we actually just ripped the vines out. And the real reason behind that was, Sean, to answer your question, is because that site we have found, we've now replanted that. We will be planting it for the 3rd time now. It's a very challenging spot, so we're going to put something that's a little bit more vigorous there. But more specifically, there's a ton of research going on in this state and a ton of collaboration. One of the most important reasons for why Oregon was able to catapult itself into the fine wine world so suddenly, and there's a lot of people in the state, and especially Early Mountain in particular, who found a really successful clone of Malbec that we do actually have on order, but the demand for high quality and healthy vine material is very high when we're reaching out to the nurseries from whom we are buying the actual vine stocks itself. And so it actually takes us a while to kind of get them. And so I think it is next year, or is it this year, that we're going to be planting it. Anyways, it's either this year or next year we're going to put Malbec in the ground, but then we still have to wait about 3 to 4 more years, Sean, until we actually get the first harvest. So, when we decided to rip those vines out after the 2017 vintage, it meant that we were going to wait about 6 to 7 more years until we got the next, even just to taste the fruit.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the long game when you're planting new vineyards and all of that. It's it's a fun project, but definitely a long one. We have gotten some good questions too about, suggestions for some different tastings. Vertical tasting, for sure. That is very much something that we are thinking about. So we will keep you posted on these. Really, the idea is that every week moving forward, while we're in this crazy time, we're going to do a new tasting kit and do one of these sessions like these every weekend. So our one coming up for next week is going to be food and wine pairing. So we're going to do some fun different wines, and then like we were talking about earlier, we've got some pretty delicious cheese and charcuterie over in the marketplace that we're going to put together and have that as a package ready for you guys. So that should be really fun, and we get to have some snacks along with wine, which is my favorite way to drink for sure. And then I saw a question way before, and I don't know if you're still here, but there was a question about so at Belfort Furniture, so our sister company, we are putting in a wine bar. So it'll be, if you've been to Belfort, they're really, they have a few different buildings there and a few different showrooms. And so it's the middle building where it used to be mattresses and kids furniture. We're turning into Stone Tower Home. So we'll have a wine bar there, and then a lot of cool furniture that is similar to what we have here on the property at the winery. And so it'll have some like cool unique finds and all sorts of stuff. So we're looking forward to that. It was supposed to be open already, but we've got a construction project that's on hold at the moment because, I guess you can probably guess why. So yeah. But
it's a great concept though. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to see how that goes. I apologize for. I wasn't laughing at you, by the way.
Sammy?
I'm getting some feedback about Tony. Tony asking where my cap is, and then David kind of reiterating. Well, I got some.
It's Sunday, you know.
My wife Jillian, who also works out here, she gives us a lot of good especially me, good constructive feedback. And yesterday I was told that I needed to lose the cap, but I had already left the house. So I had hat hair, and then so I was going without the cap today to kind of maintain a healthy environment at home is where the cap has gone. So Jill, if you're still here, I did get a positive email from one of our staff members that it was a good decision to lose the hat. But you know what, if the quarantine goes on for too much longer and I can't go get a haircut, I'm gonna need somebody to step up with some long scissors from 6 feet away and cut it, or I'm gonna the cap will return soon. So another good question, Janelle, you asked about the difference between the estate club and the Tower Crew Club. There's actually a couple. Yeah, Lindsay, Jilly is so wild. I could not agree more. But the Janelle, you asked about the estate club, and there are a couple estate club members in here. So you know, I'll definitely. If you all want to provide feedback, you can. But what I'll do is we'll follow up with you about what the details are. But essentially, is the club was really designed. There's only about 100 to 120 members within it, but it was really designed. You get 3 cases of estate wine over the course of the year, and based on that volume, your benefits are generally going to be greater. There's a lot of cool stuff you get, and what's cool too is you can kind of customize within the estate label, and you're generally going to get preview access to just about everything. So we'll send you some follow-up information, but I think there's a lot of really great perks, especially if you're watching us on Instagram Live and tasting these wines at home. We know you're a diehard, and generally that's what the estate club's kind of built for with 3 cases of wine.
Yeah.
But
and lots of fun events too.
Yeah.
Some really cool tastings and that type of thing that we like to put on.
Yeah, and so if anyone else has information about, if you're not a wine club member and have information about or want to know about the Tower Crew Club or the Estate Club, just let us know and be happy to chat with you about it. And I thought
I saw a good question too about where do we source our oak barrels from.
Yeah,
and
Cassie.
I feel like we are gonna have a whole.
We gotta do a barrel.
We're gonna have a barrel
that's a
program.
Maybe that's a.
Yeah, because the short answer is we work with quite a few different cooperages, and that's really to just add different nuance. Every barrel maker has a different style, wood coming from different forests, whatnot. So it, by working with several different barrel makers, then we're able to add different, it's basically like your spice kit as a winemaker. So we're able to add different flavors and extract kind of different nuances from the wines by using a variety of different barrel makers.
This is definitely the most engaged tasting group, and it's a lot of fun.
It is so fun.
It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
We hope you all enjoyed it. Like Lacey said, we got a fun week coming up with the stay posted for the next one will be the wine and food pairing tasting this coming Thursday. We're gonna do a happy hour at 5:00. That what the subject is, actually it sounds like it might be morphine a little bit, but it's going to be really exciting. Stay posted for details.
Yeah.
But
sparkling wine is generally.
Okay, sparkling wine still is the theme.
That's the general theme.
We're going to taste some bites, but really grab your favorite. The idea is it's not, you don't need a tasting kit or anything like that. Grab any local sparkling beverage and kind of enjoy it. Ask us your questions about sparkling wines in general, because it's my favorite style of wine, what I drink more often than anything else. And also, we'll have more of these e-tastings next weekend and some other cool stuff. But I feel like there's something else I was going to say, but I guess it's not.
I don't know. Yeah. I will say thank you all for joining us. If there's any more questions, we were happy to answer them, but otherwise, I think, maybe we're signing off.
Robert and Margie, we'll get you that information. And just so you know, Susie was the employee who shot me an email saying that it was a good call going no hat. By the way, so
So Greta, we love your mom.
Yeah. Yeah. We
For
love
lots
her
of
too.
reasons, including that one.
All right, everybody.
So fun.
Be
Yeah.
safe. Enjoy the rest of your
Great.
day, and give us any feedback on wines you want to see. We're gonna run around to
Here,
save the
we'll
video.
shut us down. Thank you.
I'll stay here so you have something to look at.